the worst thing that can happen to any person, because motivation is basically sparks of your dopamine receptors that are firing you. I was playing soccer, I kicked the ball at a very weird angle, I'm left-footed, and so I had a meniscus tear. I had a meniscus tear, a detached cartilage, and a torn ligament all in one knee, which is pretty bad. So I could walk, but I couldn't extend my leg. It was one of the lower points of my life, just because I realized that I would have to go through the entire process again. And I think it taught me a lot about resilience. In general, a lot of the times people think that communication is about yourself, when in reality it's about the other person. The experience itself was phenomenal, because you're around super ambitious people. These are the most cracked, there's no words to describe them. These are the most talented, smart, hardworking, ambitious, goal-oriented, forward-looking, inspiring, charismatic, passionate people in the world.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Welcome to Still Human, a bi-weekly podcast by Ocean Studio, featuring thoughtful conversation with builders, creator, and thinker working with AI in real life. Rather than focusing on hype or optimization, we explore how technologies affect our time, focus, creativity, and sense of self, and where being human still matters most. I'm your host, Perkin. Today I'm joined by Andrey Marey.
Andrey Marey, correct.
A 20-year-old serial founder who's already built fraud detection algorithm in London, won hackathon hosted by NVIDIA, live in Hacker Hotel in Finland, and is now trying to reinvent how students learn with AI. He's a junior at Clara University, but he hasn't waited for graduation to start building. Andrey, welcome to Still Human.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. You traveled, I did a little bit of research about you.
Okay.
You traveled to 45 countries.
Correct.
Where in the world do you feel most like yourself?
Starting off with a bang, wow. In terms of location in general, I don't think about it where I feel most like myself. I think of it where I'm most free. Mm-hmm. And I think I have to say Iceland, probably.
Iceland?
Yeah, Iceland or Peru were my top two.
That's really different.
Which is pretty different. Yeah, I think in those places when I'm a big nature guy. Yeah. So I think when you're off social media and, now I have my phone pretty much I have my phone or a device that I use for the majority of the day for, all sorts of things. But being able to disconnect and just, keep pace with reality and, connect with nature, that's very important for me. Mm-hmm. So I think those places, I just kind of don't really think about anything. And it's super peaceful.
Do you just turn off your camera and...
Yeah, I don't even have my phone. I've gone several days without my phone in these places, which is actually incredible. You realize so much when you don't have a phone. Mm-hmm. You realize how little original thoughts you have, and you kind of force yourself to think more. You also have the temptation to go on your phone for the first day or two, yeah. And then after that it goes away. You completely forget that you have a phone.
I couldn't imagine having my phone for 2 minutes.
I know, right? It's a feeling that I can't really explain unless you go through the process yourself.
Do you feel more presence as a moment?
100%. Oh, 1,000,000%. Yeah, it's the difference you can't put a number on it.
Okay, we should go on a retreat together.
I'm so down.
You rebuilt yourself after 2 knee surgeries. What was the lowest point of that recovery, and what did it teach you about iteration?
So funny story. I had injured myself for the first time when I was 16, and this was in December of 2021, I want to say. Either December 2021 or 2020. And I was playing soccer. I kicked the ball at a very weird angle. I'm left-footed. Mm-hmm. And so I had a meniscus tear. A detached cartilage, and a torn ligament all in one knee, which is pretty bad. So I could walk, but I couldn't extend my leg. And I was scheduled for surgery for May at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I had my surgery. I'd gone through the recovery period, and I was allowed to play sports afterwards. So I go to my surgeon and I'm like, hey, I want to get back into sports, because for me, sports is a very big component of my mental health and how I'm able to just be myself, I guess. And then after about 2 weeks after I fully recovered, I got my second injury in my second knee.
How can you?
And I think the moment I found out that holy shit, I have the same problem as I do in my left knee, I think that's was one of the lower points of my life, just because I realized that I would have to go through the entire process again. I spent so much effort and so much time. My parents had, supported me throughout the whole journey of the recovery period, the PT work, the electrical stimulus that you have to get through, training and through recovering your muscles. And I think it taught me a lot about resilience in general. I think I was able to understand that, I have to be more careful, obviously. So it definitely taught me a lot about risk management. So now I stick to golf, which, works out pretty well.
Good, yeah.
But I think definitely I try my best to understand how I can actually use those stories and use those learnings to my advantage in my life.
Absolutely.
So if I go through a bad situation, I know that, hey, I've been through worse. I've had 2 knee surgeries before the age of 18.
Right.
So I kind of use that as a base often to not give myself excuses, basically.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's your personal story. No one have that.
Yeah.
It's very unique.
Right.
So that's really interesting story. But here's the line in your profile. Building a career in engineering-led sales. When did you realize that explaining complexity was as valuable as coding it?
I think the world is based on people, not products. So people naturally want to buy from other people, which is why I think fundamentally, even if you're the genius of the world and you have an insane understanding of engineering and coding, I think if you're not able to communicate that into a very clear and viable solution or proposal,
Right.
You're not going to make it quite far in life. Because people in general are interested in understanding how technology works.
Right.
And a lot of the times you're not on the same wavelength as other people, meaning you can't assume that people will understand what you're trying to formulate.
Okay.
That being said, I think there's a lot of nobility in being able to know how to code well, but I think those are components that have to overlap. You can't just be really good at coding and then terrible at communication, vice versa. Because then you're pretty much...
I feel like you kind of find that middle ground. You already know some basic in coding, and then you also being able to sell whatever you make, or be good at communicating in general.
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of the times people think that communication is about yourself, when in reality it's about the other person. So a lot of the time, just in general, the way that the world works is we want to be likable. We want to, and it's a lot easier in persuasion. There's a really good tactic of similarity.
Yeah.
So for example, if you're trying to convince someone to do something, you want to be able to stand like them. So if they have their arms crossed, you would also cross your arms to try and get on a similar level.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with communication and sales, is as opposed to just trying to shove down a project or some proposal down the person's throat, you want to show them why it's valuable to their lives.
Right.
So as opposed to saying, this is the best water that you'll ever have, it's saying, are you thirsty? Because I have the perfect solution. Oh, if you're not thirsty, okay, cool, you're hungry. I have some food that I could give you or whatever. If you want to call your family, hey, I have a phone that you can call them off of. Notice how the end goal is, the output is still the same, because they're still going to buy the water, the food, the phone, or whatever it is. But your framing is different. Because if you go to a person and you say, hey, do you want to buy this phone? They're going to be like, no. And then if you say, okay, does your phone work well now? No. Okay, cool. Can you call your family? No. Okay, I have the perfect solution for you.
I see where
the end goal is still the same thing, right? It's just a different framing and perspective.
The way you approach to the questions and you approach
100%.
to the product. Yeah.
100%.
I think that's what makes a good sales, right? Amazing.
That's why I actually love sales. Because you can always find, there's an infinite amount of angles that you can use. To try and sell. And it's not I think use is the wrong word actually, because you're not trying to extort the person. You're not trying to manipulate them into buying. You genuinely want to get on the same foundational level of understanding what you can do in order to improve their life.
Right.
And why them buying your product would add value to their life, because that's ultimately the goal.
So kind of putting yourself in their shoes and feel empathy toward them, their situation. And then genuinely, for yourself, you want to use that product as well.
Yeah, 100%.
100%, yeah. And here's the interesting questions.
Okay.
I know you are no longer working with Vivora project. I'm curious, this is off the script.
Okay.
I'm curious what happened there. Story.
I don't think there's a story per se. Me and
Briefly,
yeah, so
introduce what is Vivora.
yeah, so a little context. Myself and I think it was 5 other people had started this, or had been planning to start this company called Vivora, which is essentially a competitor to Notebook LM. And if you're not familiar with Notebook LM, it is a tool that allows you to study and prepare for exams, prepare for classes. It gives you quizzes, notes, and stuff like that. And originally I was one of the devs there as well. We had been working for a couple of weeks, and then myself and my good friend Sean Wu, who you also had on this podcast, had entered a hackathon competition hosted by NVIDIA. We ended up winning the hackathon, and we got a lot of interest from the engineers. We built something in 2 hours that they couldn't build in 5 months, which is pretty cool. And we got some interest from the engineers to actually like fully flesh it out and build the whole thing. And I think it was just a time commitment. So I understood that long term, if we were to get investments, which we eventually did, we would have to quit Vivora. And so I decided to preempt that and basically not waste anybody's time, because I respect everyone's time, and tell them that like, hey, I don't think that I'll be able to contribute to Vivora. I'm letting you know now. But I still did all of the work that I was required to do in that 2 weeks or whatever of notice of like tasks that I had in Linear. So yeah, that was pretty much it. So
yeah, because we've been friends for like 2 years, right? But like I never know the story behind this.
Yeah.
And also like on the Vivora team, which is also all of our friends. And is there any specific moments that when you ever feel that you kind of like left people behind, where like you just left the project, or it's just a project, right? But like,
yeah, I think originally, no, I never regretted leaving, put it that way. So it's not a decision that I regret at all. And if I was put into the same situation, I still would have left in exactly the same way that I did. I did, feel sorry for some of the members who had to spend a lot of the time recruiting and finding new devs.
yeah,
Trying to be as humble as I am, but because I know that I'm a good developer as well, so that takes effort to try and find someone who was available for your project, and Sean including. But I know that they did a phenomenal job in the end.
yeah. I think like sometimes it's not just about like how technical you are, but it's about how you treat your stuff, your
100%, 100%, yeah. Like being obsessed. Although a lot of the people now unfortunately see that as a toxic term, but being passionate and caring about the stuff that you do and about the work that you do in general brings you a lot of momentum into your work that you can then use to compound and to become better.
Yeah, that's a good quote there.
Quote that however you want.
No, it's a good one. Yeah. So the other question is, you set a goal to launch in 50 days and reach 100,000 users by year end. Where does that aggressive timeline come from? Remember,
I do remember it was an interview that I did with, I believe it was Sophie, who was leading the Santa Clara paper at the time. This was back when I was working at Vivora. So I think looking back, the way that I set goals is I set them to be realistic but extremely hard to achieve, just because you have some kind of North Star to go to.
Yeah.
Also, I prefer setting very optimistic timelines as opposed to realistic ones, just because the realistic ones your brain works very differently when you set yourself different levels of motivation. So when you set yourself, let's say, I'm going to launch on day 1, I'm going to get 5 users. And if your goal is I'm going to launch on day 1 and I want 10,000 users, in a theoretical world, your brain is going to work very differently when you set those 2 different goals. The reason is what I like to call fake dopamine. You see the big numbers or whatever. You see the massive amount of people that are flowing to your web traffic, and you start to feel very satisfied that I hit the threshold or whatever. Even on the small goal, it's pretty much the same. You set such a basic small goal that when you hit it, you're going to be satisfied because you're like, I've hit my goal. I don't need to set more. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of the people actually look at the world. So what I try and do is I set targets that are achievable, but near impossible, because I don't think that anything is truly impossible beyond the laws of physics, obviously. But if I set myself a target goal of, let's say, 100,000 users by the first month, or by the first 2 months, we can work really hard for those 2 months, see where we're at, and then set the same goals, set the same like complexity of goals for the next 50 days. I don't think that setting a goal for 6 months, a year, 5 years is worthy, but you do need to have some kind of vision, some kind of mission that you're trying to tackle, some underlying like component that drives you to wake up basically every single morning.
Very interesting perspective. Would it be like difficult for some people if they just set a goal that, nearly impossible? How doable is that? Like some people might quit in the middle.
100%. Yeah, I think I'm also guilty of it. I'm not a perfect person. I've quit on projects before because I've lost interest or because I've thought that these projects weren't worthy, to put it quite frankly. I think it's something that a lot of people will go through, but you also learn as you develop. So my very first project, which is called Bionic Reader, I don't remember if you remember it.
Yeah, I do.
So it was a very good project. I got 5,000 visitors on my first day, and then I was like, I'm bored of this. I want to move on. So
first day,
my first day, and then I quit. Or like my first day that I launched, and I set up an ad campaign. I got 5,000 visitors, and I was like, this is boring. That was my first ever venture, by the way. Like I've never built anything before it.
Yeah.
So I was still very fresh. I still am, very, very new to this whole thing. But in general, I think being able to go through that experience and being able to learn from it and see how discipline is just like brought out. The way that I like to think of it is, this is a quote that I really like, is just imagine that you always have a camera following you. And it's like, what would the audience be screaming at you? Like at all times of like, this is so obvious.
So
like, you have to do this.
What's your answer for that?
Well, for me, I think in general, it's probably take more risks.
Take more risks.
I think I am extremely like risky as a person, but I can definitely take more risks. So in terms of work, in terms of, skipping more classes, although,
having to,
I legally can't do that. But yeah, just being more risky and just taking more opportunities that are given to me. I think I get gifted opportunities through luck. Everyone makes their own luck.
Yeah.
And, I have plenty of opportunities to take from. I take probably the best one that I assess, and then I overthink too much. I need to be able to just trust my gut more.
Yeah. I think everyone overthink.
Which is natural.
Yeah,
and, I'm learning, so over time, I don't regret anything in life, to be honest.
Very interesting. Maybe it's a cultural difference stuff. Like in Asia, we are more reserved. Like we manage the risk.
I come from a very reserved household, to be completely honest.
Really?
Yeah, my family.
Where's the risky mindset come from then?
I think it's the environment that I'm in. I think I see more people my age who I'm friends with, even beyond, the university, who I see are traveling to other countries completely solo. No, they have like $1,000 in their savings, and they're just like, you know what, fuck it, I want to figure life out, and they go and take these bold risks. And I look at them and I go, why not me? Like I don't mean that in like a hateful or jealous way.
Yeah.
I'm saying it like, I know this person. I'm very close to them. I choose all my friends based on my values a lot of the times. And I think I take very great pride in that. And I see that, these people are very similar to me. And I understand that in theory, I could also make that jump, but I'm scared. So I'm trying to understand the psychology of it, of like, why am I scared? What am I scared of? Am I scared of failure? Am I scared of not getting the validation from my parents that this is a good idea? Am I scared of it not turning out as I expect it to be? Am I scared of it like being able to like it too much? And then you go into this kind of spiral. And I think that prevents me from the initial jump to make. And a lot of the times I've caught myself right at the phase where I'm starting to think, and then I just take the action. And every single time it's been rewarding.
That's actually really helpful for lots of people when they're trying to do something, but they start thinking. But when you're thinking, it's always
already too late. It's like when you're at a bridge and you're bungee jumping. You don't let your brain get to 3. You have to jump before 3 because then your brain, because your brain is going to stop you from doing it.
Execution matter.
Actually, 100%.
100%,
Yeah.
That's like what we've been talking a lot about, like doing entrepreneurship, like execution, especially with AI.
Ideas matter, but execution matters more.
Yeah.
Execution and distribution. It's how do you get, anyone can have ideas these days. I can go on AI, I can ask it to make me 50 ideas for apps that are guaranteed to go viral.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you pick the right one? to say no to, which gives you, like, as opposed to the way that I look at life and entrepreneurship in general, is as opposed to trying to test as many ideas and people saying yes, it's how can you get no the fastest? So how can you test an idea where people will completely dog on it and say no, which will give you feedback to then move into directions until people say yes?
I think I heard very similar suggestion where it's called like negative feedback loop. Like you get like rejection and it's kind of, you get feedback and then you get feedback, you grow. And then it's always like the faster you get more rejection, the faster you grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other question I have for you is more on the academic side. You balance a dual major in math and CS, multiple startup and hackathon circuit. What's actually hard about this life that you don't post about? Like people not actually know. I know you were active on X and stuff like that, but what's actually the part that doesn't really appear on social media? What you really struggle with?
I would say, like, if you asked me this a year ago, I would say time management, because I would set up priorities and not understand how to manage my time. Now I'm way more disciplined than I used to be a year ago, and I think I work as if I have a camera following me. So I can be fully solo. I practice what I preach, basically.
That is now your principle.
100%. So if I'm, lying in bed, doom scrolling on Instagram, I will pretty often catch myself and tell my brain, like, I can't be doing this right now. Like, I have things to do. And it's a very difficult thing to get to. It is. I have trained for months and months and months of that feeling and that, like, experience of catching yourself in the moment and being aware of it. Not when you're, like, doomlessly scrolling, you're laughing, you're like, oh, should I work? Nah. But it's like right before your finger, like, performs the scroll, you really sit and think, and you're like, okay, I have all this stuff. That, like, whole practice, that, like, 30-second brain interaction is what's going to change you ultimately. So the question is whether you cave in and you keep scrolling, which is still fine in theory, because you told your brain it's just that component of your dopamine receptors that just won over your, discipline component. So for me, I used to be in the field where I was like, oh, do I really want to do this? Nah. And then I went back to scrolling. But then over time, you start building that up. And now I'm probably the most disciplined I've ever been in my life.
Really?
So
that's amazing.
I try and, work for the majority of the day. So I try and extract the most of my day that I can.
How do you find the balance when, it's time to, maybe take a break?
I think for me, I'm probably the wrong person to ask just because it's going to sound really corny, but I'm kind of addicted to the work. Which is, for my parents, it's a bad thing because they see how much I work. They think that it brings me stress, even though it doesn't. It brings me a bunch of joy and stress. It's kind of like a good little trade-off. Yeah. But I think with me and with a lot of people, I try and listen to my body as much as I can. So for example, if I'm really tired and my eyes are closing, I understand that I'm not going to be able to do anything effective. So the best investment that I can make in that time, as opposed to just trying to power through because I have a task, is just to add it to my task list that I'm going to do in the morning. And then I just go to bed. It's a very dangerous game where you're like, oh, I'm so tired. And then you go on, like, Instagram and you scroll reels. Don't do that,
100%,
obviously. Please don't do that. Don't do that. But yeah, I think just discipline.
Yeah, discipline. Do you feel like discipline is way more important than motivation? Because sometimes I got motivated.
Yeah, 100%. Like
I like to go to YouTube and watch motivation.
Oh yeah, put it this way. I think the motivation. Don't get me wrong. I also used to be in that place. I think motivation is the worst thing that can happen to any person because motivation is basically sparks of your dopamine receptors that are firing away.
Is that wrong? It doesn't trigger you the right way.
Well, put it this way. It triggers you, but you're not taking any action on it. So there's no point. It's basically the same thing as scrolling. It's like thinking about, becoming rich as opposed to actually becoming rich. The effect on your brain is the same. If you think about becoming rich and driving all these cars, and then you're actually driving all these cars, supposedly that's what you like, your brain is going to react in exactly the identical way, which is why these people watch all these motivational videos, why these people watch all these, like Chris and Steven and, Andrew and all these people and David Goggins who are like, work more, do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then in reality, they're like, sure. And then they keep scrolling.
Yeah.
But discipline is what really moves the needle.
Discipline,
Yeah. If you're able to get up past your emotions and do the work past your emotions, you're going to be, your future self is going to thank you a lot.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes when you practice this discipline so much, it's almost become part of your life and you don't even feel like you're forcing yourself to do something. You develop habits that you kind of like naturally wake up, you have to do A, B, and C.
100%.
Go to the gym and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the most important components of it all, is you can relearn a habit in 28 days.
Yeah, 28 days.
So, but the thing that I like as well, it's another quote, is if you see a massive burger, you can't eat it all in one. You have to take small bites.
Right.
It's the same thing if you're in a pitch black forest and you see the mountaintop. Realistically, you can't climb the mountain because you can only climb if you look down at one step at a time. It's the same thing. You have to try and build the habits day by day, hour by hour. You have to try. If you have a gambling addiction, if you have a drug addiction, if you have whatever addiction that you have, the best way to beat it is by going over it. Yeah, exactly. Small progress is just go day by day.
You have been doing a lot of things like in the past 2 years. As a friend, I hear you like shifting from like all the way from, bionics and then now like marketing, that's a lot of things. And was there a moment where you thought like, I'm moving too fast, or this is not the magical as it looks?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm living in it pretty much. It's like one of my good friends, Max, I don't know if you've interviewed him yet. He is the most focused man that I know in my close circle.
Yeah.
And look at his results compared to mine.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying this is a competition. I'm very happy for him, obviously. Yeah. But I think in general, the ability to jump fast is not necessarily terrible, but it's not great. Because you are climbing one step of 100 ladders as opposed to climbing one ladder to the top, which is great because you're able to understand what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
But again, with a grain of salt, because you never give yourself the depth to really explore a topic. You're gonna have moments where you don't like something in every single field of work or study that you do at one point in life. That is guaranteed to happen. No person has ever gotten perfect or had a perfect journey.
Would you say right now the thing that you're doing, you kind of like almost find the thing that you want to do longer, have more depth?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of my goals is to have an impact in the future. And the articles that I write, the posts that I write, et cetera, are educating people about AI, about best practices, et cetera. I'm connecting with people on social media.
Yeah,
and,
awesome.
I have over 15 million views to date in the last 6 months.
Shout out to your X account.
Yeah, Andrey _ HQ.
Yes.
Bang.
Let's go. So is there anything that you intentionally to keep it like human? What's something you refuse to automate or optimize, like using AI or like using workflow? Anything that you want to reserve that human being components in it?
I would never text my friends or my parents with AI, ever. I think that's one thing that I hold very dear to my heart. So human relationships and the component of human relationships, if I'm ever in a relationship or when I get into a relationship, I'm never going to use AI to consult or, talk about like, oh, my girlfriend said this, like, what do I reply? I think that is probably the most detrimental, horrible, worst case scenario that you can possibly get to.
Why'd you say that?
I think what makes us humans?
The human connection.
Correct. Human connections and, the social elements of life.
Yeah.
And I think if you're delegating your emotional intelligence to a machine, pretty much, which is just compiled full of math, you're losing all your autonomy. You essentially just grant someone else access into your life to make decisions for you, which I think is a very weak thing to do as a person. I would much rather navigate a very complex conflict, lose, I don't care about being right or wrong in an argument. I think the whole point of it is to hear the other person out and to come to an agreement. And I think if I were ever to get into an argument with someone dear to me, I would much rather lose because I was human than be right because I used AI to try and mathematically solve what the best path is.
Okay, I see where you're going.
And I think in general, like, I will never understand people who use AI for consulting about their relationships, about their family situations. I think the maximum that I've given it is about my life. And so I have a personal, like file or something that I talk about all my finances, all my plans for the next 5 to 10 years, my goals, my values, and everything that I could possibly give it to me about me. And family and human relationships come into those values as well quite dearly, but I would never offload that component, that human component, to a machine.
That's fair. That's totally reasonable. So it would entirely limit it to, just like on the human level connection. You would not use AI.
Put it this way, I think I need to mention a caveat. For example, in advertising, I would use AI for advertising. I understand that the people who would be viewing me are human.
Yeah.
For now, they could be AI in the future.
Okay.
So on that side, technically, you're using AI to communicate because you're communicating some kind of deliverable or some kind of proposition or ad campaign, whatever, to an end human. In that element, I would use AI for advertising just because of the scale of the work that I can do. I can set up 150 campaigns for like $10. But definitely not for like human-to-human interaction.
Would there be a difference? Like, I know there's a lot of people against with AI content on all those digital medias where like they wish they could see real content creator creating real stuff that it's written by human, it's filmed by human, and not just like seeing article from AI, seeing videos AI make. And wouldn't you say, what's the difference between like having those having those videos AI generated compared to, talking with your families, talking with your girlfriend, whatever?
I think I have a hot take in that I think the creative roles are only going to explode more. So I think that human creators are going to get replaced for a little bit, and then they're going to make a huge comeback within the next decade. The reason for that is because what makes us human is our brain, our creativity.
Yeah.
AI is just pattern recognition. It's just being able to identify patterns in the past and then being able to set some kind of response for the future. So that being said, I think AI for content is good if you have the right intentions, but if you're just trying to make a profit or whatever, I think there's too much consumerism in the world, meaning too many people passively consume content without ever thinking about it.
Yeah.
For example, do you watch TikTok or do you watch Instagram?
Sometimes,
Yeah. Can you name me the last 3 videos that you watched?
No.
Exactly. Can you name me the last 1 video that you watched?
No.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
And that's not a shot at you, by the way. But that goes to show that a lot of people are just simply consuming without ever turning on their brain. And so what makes humans really creative is being able to turn on your brain, being able to think about, okay, I need this camera setup, I need this camera setup, I need that camera setup, I need this recording going, I need this microphone here, I need this microphone here. Nobody told you to do this. You can't delegate that to AI. Sure, AI can tell you that like, cool, put a mic, 3 cameras, whatever, call it quits. But you have to think about, okay, how do I want this to look? How do I want this to feel? Like all those elements are made by you. They can't ever be replaced by a machine. Same thing for writing as well.
Yeah. Well, like there's definitely more questions on that. Like, what if like AGI comes and like
AGI is basically
already
around the corner.
Yeah.
It's practically going to be here. I know a buddy who has an 8 sleep bed, which is this like bed with tech, and his Claude bot identified when he was waking up.
Yeah.
And it like ordered coffee for him as he was waking up already, like to his doorstep.
No way.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, like it's a bit intimidating.
It's very intimidating.
Yeah.
I think as someone like I love AI.
Yeah.
But that's still really fucking scary.
Yeah, like do something that you wouldn't expect it.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
almost having someone.
And if it can learn that you order bagels and coffee at 8 in the morning every single time, but then on Tuesday your girlfriend comes over and you order avocado on toast, and it's a Tuesday, what's your AI gonna order?
Yeah, you'll probably be confused.
Yeah, exactly.
What's happening here? Do you feel the tension between sprint culture and actually being present? I think we briefly touched about this at the beginning.
Sorry, between what culture?
Sprint culture, like everything moving so fast, like,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it's a weird dynamic because I always feel like I'm behind, even though I know that I'm ahead. So, and that's speaking only from the AI world perspective. I'm probably a good like 8 months ahead of and by ahead, I mean of the general population, not like specific people. And that's because I have a Twitter account or X account. That's because I live in the Bay Area now. I'm living among all this technology that's emerging from here. So by the time that it makes the news, by the time it starts to spread, Other people hear about it like months and months, if not years later. Majority of people don't even know what Claude is. You'll be surprised. I'm not even joking. You'll be surprised. Which is crazy to imagine, right? Because
exactly.
you know the world moves so fast nowadays. So I think there's both beauty and a shame in it because it's really easy to get overwhelmed when you have so much, so much of the AI that is out there, so many new things, that are coming out, etc. But I think on the bright side, there's so much experimentation that you can go through. So you're given so many more opportunities at success. So you basically have to take them.
I want to briefly talk about the FRA in Finland. That place is described as hacker hotel.
Yeah.
And you got a 34-inch monitors, saunas, and 24 hours daylight, and a culture of building crazy idea. What was that environment actually like?
The environment was, I want to say intense, but that's the wrong word. It was, first of all, I want to say I loved every single person there. I don't think I had a great relationship with everyone. Everyone got along really well because of the high caliber of people that were there. There were some of the most, there was a kid, I'm going to shout him out, Devesh. He was a NASA engineer at 16. And 16 years old, he worked at NASA. And then he now founded his own company to go work in agriculture for the moon. So he was building like farms in a very condensed environment for the moon, for the agricultural space. I actually connected one of Michael's friends with him as well. Yeah. But I think the experience itself was phenomenal because you're around super ambitious people. These are the most there's no words to describe them. These are the most talented, smart, hardworking, ambitious, goal-oriented, forward-looking, inspiring, charismatic, passionate people in the world. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. You're right. And, personally, I think I was there too early. Meaning, I think if I went there now, I would have had a much different experience than when I went in the summer. Just because all these people have been working for 5+ years. I've been working for 5 months. So I didn't have the experience to be as, disciplined and et cetera. And I was, lazy and I was doing, I was working 20 hours a day one day and then I'd go on a 3-day break or whatever. And then I would feel guilty about it. There's someone outside the door, by the way. And I feel like in general, it's a very crazy environment to be in. You can't describe it. It's very, very crazy.
Because I remember initially when you told us that you're going to Finland in that program, it's everyone is excited for you. And suddenly over the summer, you told us that you leave that place for your personal reason. And I'm kind of in the shock, to be honest. I thought you finally find something that you're really passionate or find the right place for you. And then you suddenly just left. And yeah. That's a huge, at least for me, I think that's a very big change.
Yeah, I do think it was a very tough decision, first of all, to leave that place just because there was so much opportunity to grow and to really face difficult problems. But I think for me, it's one of those decisions where you kind of sleep on them and you think, is this really for me? And that was kind of what happened with me, is I thought that I was, as I said just now, I was too early. Meaning I wasn't in the right headspace. Mentally, physically, I was burned out from the year. I had been working on the robotics project. I had split up with my co-founder, Sean, and I literally just needed a break. And, it's very easy to come up with an excuse of being oh, you know what, you're a pussy, you need a break. It's no, that's not really how it worked. Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically how it worked out.
On a more human level questions, what human skill do you think become more important, not less, as AI improves?
Communication. 100%. Communication, originality of thoughts, and being able to clearly communicate all your opinions, all your thoughts into a very concise manner. I think if you lose your ability to rationally think, you no longer become human. Yeah, so communication.
Communication, okay. So before we continue, I have a question passed to you from our previous guest. He asked, if you didn't have to worry about how you are going to make money or any of the societal pressure, what problem would you try to solve? If there's nothing to worry.
Probably the problem. Like, it's so sad to say that there's so many problems in the world, so you can't really, tackle one of them. I would say homelessness. I think homelessness, just because it is a privilege to have a house over your head, and I think it gives you a level of security and comfort knowing that you have a place to sleep that can eliminate a lot of your stress.
Okay.
And I think it's a lot easier to get food from strangers than a house from strangers, or like to ask them to bring you in. And I think I thankfully don't have any homeless friends at all, but we do go up to San Francisco. We see how it affects the homeless people, and I think if I were able to change that, then that's what I would go with.
That's very ambitious, and I think that's always the biggest problems that governments want to solve. But
100%.
Like, there's people taking advantage of societal benefits.
Yeah.
But also, like, people really need help. So
yeah, 100%.
Each of us have just limited amount of resource. We cannot help all.
100%.
So yeah. So before we close, I ask every guest on this. If you could leave one question for the next guest, for someone else working with AI, what would you ask them?
Specifically working with AI?
Well, something related to AI, like it could be, or like entrepreneurship, like AI.
Yeah. Knowing how the world is now, if you could go back 3 years in time, what would you build and why?
Going back 3 years in time.
Yeah, so if you knew exactly how the world is today, but you teleported back to 2023 or 2022, what would you build and why?
That's a good one. Okay, I'll leave this for our next guest.
Awesome.
Which is Toby.
Interesting. I am excited to see what Toby replies.
Okay. So I asked every guest this question as well. It's the signature question for this podcast. As AI become more present in our lives and work, where do you feel still human matter most?
Any form of human relationships. So this is going to be a shout out to one of my very good friends, Assad. If you remember him, he worked at Google.
Yeah.
So he works on a really cool company called Offline. And Offline it uses AI to form human connections.
Right.
And force people to meet. Yeah, it's offline. So it's not online connections. It uses AI to assess who you would probably be friends with in your close perimeter circle or environment, and it would promote you to go and meet up in real life. And I think those companies are going to start to rise more and more. So I would bet my life on Assad becoming successful, because what makes us human are relationships, and whether that's with your partner, whether that's with your friends, whether that's through your parents, whatever that might be, but that is what we are destined and designed to do.
Yeah.
So I think if you are able to leverage the capabilities of technology into promoting human relationships, you are going to be an extremely successful person in your life.
Yeah, I like that response and the example that you bring up. And I think that's the whole reason why I kind of start this whole podcast stuff. Like, I love to talk with people like you, having a lot of unique story and, having that more human level of connection.
Yeah.
But it's also like about AI. So I just wanted to prove that, like, no matter how AI developed, there's still human component in it, and like the human connection is always still the most important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Birkin.
This is
great.
A great episode.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Dude, hell yeah.
It's a good one.
Huh?
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's gonna be really good. I can't wait to see the edits.